Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reading into Culture. My name's Zara,
Hey, I'm Chris.
and we're joined today by Sebastian Barros.
Hi, Sebastian.
Hey, hi guys.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, like I said earlier, it's hot in New York, but we're surviving. I know you guys are in a similar position.
Yeah,
Yeah, all around, doing pretty well.
nice. That's good. That's good.
Nice.
Good to hear.
Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure, yes. Hi, I'm Sebastian Barros. I am a poet and editor. I was born in the Philippines and I moved to California when I was 13. I spent my high school and college years here and the rest of my life since. I currently live in New York, in Brooklyn, and I currently serve as co-editor in chief of Milk Press, which is an online literary arts and magazine for the Poetry Society of New York, which is an incredible nonprofit that offers free and affordable classes, festivals, events. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. I've got to check it out.
Yeah. So should you, dear listener.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about your story with writing?
Yeah, sure. So I think I've always identified more as a reader than a writer. But I didn't have a relationship with poetry all that much until high school when, as you know, a very moody, depressed teenager, I was writing very angsty poems a la Sylvia Plath, very confessional and Sexton. Um, and, it was like stuff about boys, so it wasn't very, robust things. But yeah, I always thought I would be a fiction writer mostly because I was obsessed with modernist and postmodernist writers, Toni Morrison, William Faulkner, um, Nabokov. Yeah, so I always thought that. But so I went into college as an English major, uh, thinking I would do more fiction. But I had one semester where none of the classes I wanted were available except for poetry classes. And I figured, well, since I don't really know anything about poetry, I might as well just double down. So I took two classes, one in American poetry and one in contemporary poetry. And that sort of changed the trajectory of my writing completely. That I sort of found, like, I guess, a new language for writing. So yeah, and I've been writing poetry mostly ever since.
Amazing. That's so cool. That's interesting how these kind of unexpected things. Maybe in the first second you were thinking, "Oh, damn, I want to take these other classes," and how they can have such an impact on your whole life. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Would you like to read out your poem for us?
Yes. Hold on, let me pull it up. Where is it? I'm very bad at technology, so bear with
You
me.
can find it at readingintoculture.com/summer-2026.
Exactly.
I think you're fine.
I swear I had it up, but it disappeared the moment you look away. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Immigrant Pastoral number 38. Suppose it depends on which way your neck is bent. Up north, I hear talk of evergreens. How's it any different from here where there is no word for winter? Names accrue like seasons. Tragedy precedes and we follow. An immigrant poet could write about mothers as they inevitably do. If I open my mouth, then who will spit in it? Someone else's eyes chilling the back of your head, resentment like leaking gas, rainbowed in the light of rain. The city is cleaner than you left it, but less like a city now than a mall. What, realistically, could you call a round trip? There is a story about my aunt's old mango tree. or another aunt's plastic bags folded like flags, military style, tucked beneath the kitchen sink. The fever first in your throat, then your legs, the light which candies the leaves. The fruit barely at a swell, and still April is cruel wherever you go. The city bloodier than you left it, and no less broken. How much is left to look back on? How much future is left anyway? If I could choose, I would choose this life over again. An immigrant poet could write about groceries, or a touch, or the moon, which all poets require but always fall short of obtaining. Why this endless need to self alchemize? Or perhaps it is just barely enough to know what makes one unbearably real. A bookstore, an underpass, old growth forest, stranger's sweat, Manila in the daytime, Chaparral Grove, my aunt's mango tree, Brooklyn in July, airplane window seats, stranger's piss, Manila at night, California tide pools at dusk, the gasoline smell of a freshly crushed leaf, and salt water, so much of the living salt water.
Incredible. Thank you.
Very good, very well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful poem.
Thank you.
I think I would like to begin our discussion probably in a very obvious place, which is the immigrant poet. I find it very interesting. The immigrant poet is almost talked about in a sarcastic way, like how I read it. That an immigrant poet could write about things in a specific way, and there is kind of a subtle rejection of this way that the immigrant poet would talk about situations, and even the title Immigrant Pastoral number 38 kind of seems like there's so much of this kind of writing, maybe, or there's something. The rest of the poem doesn't strike me as kind of cutting or sarcastic in any way, but the kind of the talk of the immigrant poet I think is very interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of who that figure is in the poem?
Yeah. Well, the title is definitely tongue-in-cheek. I don't think I've written 38 immigrant pastorals. There is a number 8 and there is a number 10, which I'm working on. But yeah, 1 through 38, I probably don't have. But yeah, it's certainly like 100%. Like it was coming from a place of like there's a ton of poets writing about immigration and their trauma, and sort of when thinking about writing about my own experience, I thought, well, I'm sort of just adding to the sort of the huge sea of so many, and you know, where do I fit in that? And yeah, how do I navigate this sort of there's a sense too of how do I navigate this market of trying to advertise myself as like an immigrant poet, which a lot of I feel like poets tend to do now these days. But yeah, sort of writing from that voice, I feel like there was a lot of the sarcasm comes from a loving place, I think. And yeah, because a lot of these poems are so important to me too. It's not like I'm sort of lambasting them in a way. So that's sort of where the immigrant poet sort of comes from. I also wanted to occupy this sort of more lyric, contemplative, romantic with a capital R voice, because of the pastoral, and
Yes.
I really wanted to use yeah, it was a very lyric heavy
Yes.
position. So I wanted to sort of
Mm.
um, really capture that, talking about the speaker and the I of the
Mm.
poem. Yeah,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, I
that makes
totally
sense.
see that.
Well, that makes total
Yeah,
sense.
that's such a good point.
That's one of the very striking things about the poem is the decision to write it in the second person. At least it seems to me to be written in the second person. It could be that it's addressing somebody, but it strikes me as being written in the second person. Um, and I guess maybe I want to interrogate this. To me as well, like the phrase immigrant poet, it strikes me as not just a kind of criticism of a certain mode of poetry, but also a certain discourse around poetry, a certain categorization of writers as immigrant poets, perhaps, that this poem is maybe resisting. So not just, it's not, I read it less as a response to the work in and of itself of certain writers, and more as a response to how that work is viewed or categorized.
Interesting. I didn't see that. I think it engages with immigrant poetry like with an appreciation, if that makes sense. Like with a kind of, I don't know. I found that very, very surprising.
I know as there's a difference between a poet who's an immigrant and an immigrant poet. And I think, I don't know, maybe the poem is resisting a kind of lazy way to fit certain poets in certain boxes. It's kind of how I see it, at least. I don't know. How would you respond to that, Sebastian?
I think there's definitely that valence. I think, it's funny. I haven't really questioned the sort of immigrant poet that much in the poem itself, which is I think why I'm having trouble sort of like theorizing about it. But yeah, I think a lot of it too is thinking about, or a lot of the poem is concerned about the other and how the immigrant poet is viewed, from multiple perspectives of like both from other immigrants and
Yes.
from a sort of like more dominant hegemonic worldview. Um, yeah, so I wanted to explore that. Certainly, like I wanted to incorporate a real ambivalence in the poem. So I didn't want it to decide that things were one way or another. I wanted to more explore that tension
Yes.
and that sort of the contradictions. Um, yeah.
Yes, I definitely think it's so interesting this the idea that kind of I don't know, the romantic poets, like I think it's that's so true. I hadn't thought about it like that, and I really like the opening of the poem as well. Suppose it depends on which way your neck is bent. It feels like basically it's just saying it depends on which way you're looking at it from, maybe, or which way you're looking generally. But it's such a great image because it almost feels painful. It almost feels like it's so bodily, and your neck being bent is kind of, it sounds kind of uncomfortable, and I don't know, this kind of having a perspective as a kind of bodily act that is not super comfortable and not just a purely kind of mental cerebral thing.
That's a good way to see it.
There was I would definitely wanted there to be a sort of like displacement, sort of feeling of where am I right now, like, um, and that uncomfortable position of like you don't know, or the reader doesn't know exactly where I'm writing from. Am I like, because part of the sort of threadbare original version of this poem was written in my first time back in the Philippines after 10 years.
Yes.
And sort of, so I wanted to write from a place of uh, where I was at the time, but also sort of decentering the idea of the immigrant poet as a person just writing from the center of like empire or
Yeah.
America or um, yeah, the center of like hegemony.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think that's maybe something the poem does, is it creates a distance between the speaker and immigration. It and it creates an ambivalent relationship. It's unclear if and to what extent the speaker is an immigrant, and if so, to where. And I think that's very fascinating. It's not like I'm come from the Philippines. I'm here in America. I miss the Philippines. That's the poem. It's much more. It's much more complicated. It's much more. You can read this poem easily as an immigrant to the Philippines. There's a lot of texture there, or there's a kind of a commentary on. I don't know. There's an ambivalent relationship to immigration in and of itself, and as a kind of concept, and we don't really know where the speaker stands in relation to immigration. And I think that's very fascinating. And you achieve that with this An Immigrant Poet, which explicitly distanced the speaker from that role. I don't know. Everything that really comes across is ambivalence towards the role of immigration, towards immigration.
Yeah, I think a lot of writing, I think I sort of not fell into the trap, but sort of a lot of my writing, as I was beginning to write poetry in college, was centered around like um, decolonization, learning about like in the Foucauldian sense, like biopolitics,
Yeah.
like learning like more about how I'm a determined subject, and sort of that influenced my writing in a way where I guess part of it is that my sort of the major a major influence in my writing happens to be like language poetry and conceptual poetry.
Yes.
I think that was sort of more de rigueur at the college that I went to. Um, and so a lot of that was a lot of queer theory and critical theory
Yeah.
about like fragmentation and
Yes.
rupture and formlessness, and sort of really putting those sort of ideals on a pedestal. And so much of my writing came from that place, and I love the works that I made in those times as well. But at a certain point, it felt, ironically, it wasn't liberating. I felt overdetermined, um, and so I wanted to. I felt like I felt split. I felt like scattered, and in the way I was viewing my life, and sort of when it came to just actually looking at my life, um, I didn't want to feel that way, and B, there was so much that wasn't scattered and fragmented and traumatic, and there was so
Yes.
much of my life that is so lovely. I mean, not to be too sentimental, but
No, totally.
yeah, I so I wanted to find like uh, a voice that was whole, essentially, and that's why the lyric suited the poem so well. Um, I'm reading this book, The New Black by Darian Leader. It's like a psychoanalysis book, and in it he talks about the melancholic, and the melancholic identifies with the dead, identifies with loss. It often adopts like the mannerisms of the dead. I think the example he gives is that like there was uh, there was a man who as a child lost his father and would often hide in suitcases. And sort of realizing later on, much later on, that it was sort of a way of connecting with his father being in the coffin, sort of And I guess in that sense, I didn't want to identify with loss. I didn't want to identify with what I had lost. And yeah, so that's why I bring all these like images in, not to necessarily uh, interpret them, but to bring them into the fold, to sort of value them and like still uh, I don't know, take care of them, in a way, hold them dear to me, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super lovely. I do think also the different places you talk about and the different kind of stories and aspects is it's like it's not romanticized, but it's not like condemned either. It's like I can so see that in the poem that these like the ants, mango tree, and the plastic bags, they're not like it doesn't seem like the speaker wants like a kind of an idealized perfect past back, but also isn't just completely heartbroken or isn't criticizing. And so that's really interesting. That's I really love that. It's a very, very beautiful way to think about poetry, but also to think about life, you know, to kind of think about it as wholeness. And it's fascinating that that's kind of the reason why you use the lyric as a form, and because I guess it's not so usual in contemporary kind of literary spaces to do something that is whole and not split and ruptured. And I feel like it's not, I don't know, I do totally get what you mean, that is kind of the way you're what you're kind of pushed to do, or what you're pushed to value is this split and this rupture, and wholeness is kind of maybe seen as lesser than, but I think it works it works beautifully. It's like with complexity and still kind of I don't know.
Yeah, I maybe want to interrogate this. The poem is not just lyric but pastoral, and I want to it's a kind of specific form of the lyric, and I kind of want to interrogate that decision. Why write a pastoral poem and an ode or a sonnet? Or I guess is my question, what is the kind of specific drive there to write a specifically pastoral poem?
Yeah, so I thought the pastoral, I mean, I know technically it's supposed to be about rural and the rural and the countryside and
Yes.
like
Shepherds.
you know, shepherds, exactly. There's no shepherds in this. Although I could be the shepherd, but I'm a very bad shepherd.
I got a whole thing on shepherds, don't worry, we'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought like there was, but in pastorals, there's always a relationship to land.
Yes.
And
True, yeah.
I thought, you know, that was a very interesting place. You know, a lot of my thinking of pastoral comes from this essay, How Pastoral, by Lisa Robertson. I don't know if you know the poet and critic Lisa Robertson, where she calls the pastoral a nation-making genre, where, you know, sort of first as an imperialist form, and then later on as a capitalist form, talking about like, you know, this sort of fiction of utopia and the landscape as sort of completely subject to human intervention and culture and, you know, civilization, sort of tamed by it. But yeah, it's that relation to the land that like, and to nation making that I thought was really ripe for talking about what it's like to be an immigrant, what it's like to be cross boundaries. Yeah, she also talks about it as like a form of nostalgia. Like the pastoral is a form of nostalgia.
Yes.
And yeah, so in thinking of like the immigrant poems in general, not to categorize, not to commit the sin of categorization, but thinking of the immigrant poem in general, a lot of it is like nostalgia based and sort of the idealization of the motherland. I hate that word, motherland, but the motherland. And I wanted to resist that. I think I've always been sort of sober when it comes to viewing my country. Like I grew up in the early 2000s, and we were a very politically aware family. We watched the news every night, and so it was just one scandal, one corrupt politician after another. And so like I guess when I moved, I never really had like this idealized version of a country, of a place to look back on. Um, it was very sobering, growing up in like the Philippines. I mean, it's arguably worse now. I mean, objectively, I think it's a bloodier because of the Duterte's drug war. Um, it's yeah, it's so much worse now.
I think that's very interesting because the pastoral is, as you say, such a almost a colonial form, a colonial mode of kind of land ownership somehow. And if you think about the colonization, it relies a lot on the clearing of forests for grazing, animal grazing, which is kind of the primary motif of pastoral poetry. So there's an interesting tension in Immigrant pastoral, because at least in this poem, the immigrant, obviously there's always been immigration, but the immigrant in this poem seems to me constructed as like a post-colonial subject, a kind of a subject in relationship to an empire that is a kind of post-colonial situation, and the kind of colonial mode with a post-colonial speaker is a very interesting kind of imbalance there. So I think I very much agree. I don't know if that's what you just said, but said more stupidly. But I think that's, it clearly comes across what you're trying to do there. I don't know how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't think I know where else to take that. I think you definitely summed it up.
Okay, super. Now I'm going to get to my thing about shepherds then.
Yeah.
So a shepherd as well, but there's also like an interesting, like a shepherd. You said maybe I'm the shepherd, right? There's like the shepherd is an interesting figure. Is a kind of marginal figure in society. Is a kind of shepherds were generally wage laborers, kind of on the margins of society, who weren't very well paid or remunerated, often young boys or men, and that's kind of, and they obviously had to move around a lot because of the sheep, but they were also kind of deeply tied to the land, and this kind of being at once deeply embodied in a land, on the other hand completely untethered, is very striking to me. I don't know, but there's something there in the idea of a shepherd. I find I don't know if anybody has any other shepherd based thoughts, but I find the shepherd pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a sense that like I see what there's like a sort of nomadic sense to the shepherd.
Exactly. Yes. That's a good way of putting it. Mm-hmm.
And definitely, there's definitely the figure of the immigrant poet, I think here is very nomadic. It definitely doesn't tie itself to one. It acknowledges the places it's been, but it never ties itself down to one single locale. Yeah, sort of. I wasn't sort of thinking much about sort of like labor relations in sort of this version of the pastoral. But I think certainly there's like a sort of middle class element, I guess, especially with the sort of image of my aunt sort of saving up the plastic bags to use. If if I'm the shepherd, then I'm a very bad shepherd, and is sort of unable to wrangle my thoughts, or not, I'm not corralling them for any sort of purpose. Sort of, maybe I follow the sheep instead of leading the sheep. Maybe I let the sheep take me somewhere else. Yeah.
I love that.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Sounds great. I would like to talk about the second and the third line, mostly because I think they're great. Up north, I hear talk of evergreens. How is it any different from here, where there's no word for winter? So I read that as, the trees don't lose their leaves in both places. One because there are evergreens, and one because there's no winter. So it's kind of the same, but also the complete opposite. And then also one of these places has a language for the kind of experience, and the other one doesn't. I don't know, how do you read these lines? How do you, what themes kind of come up for you when I kind of echo back to you how I see it?
I think, I mean, a lot of it is literal. There is no word for winter in it, and the seasons are just the dry seasons and the rainy seasons. But sort of, I thought of evergreen as like a figure for like cash, and
Interesting.
for the sort of wealth of America, G7 nations, etc. And sort of contrasting that with the idea of the Philippines as a developing country. Third world, is the non-PC term for developing country now. But I also thought about abundance, and how, because there is no winter, there's a constant bloom to the land. It's like it's constantly giving. So I thought there was sort of a contrast there to um, um, differentiate between wealth of like of land, of fertility of the land, of its arableness, of its ability to produce wealth, but in a different way.
That makes me sorry. Maybe I'm too shepherd obsessed, but it brings me back. So that's right. Like the pastoral agriculture. So the grazing of animals is a kind of in historical tension with sedentary agriculture. So the growing of crops, right? And generally the growing of crops creates kind of wealthier societies, and then the nomadic people who graze animals are kind of pushed to the margins in the hills. Is a kind of general tension across millennia and almost all civilizations. There's this kind of tension between these two forms of agriculture. So as well, the pastoral is specifically about that kind of more marginal animal grazing based form. So that discussion of evergreens and cash and crops, I think also feels deeply pastoral there. It kind of brings out the politics of the pastoral in a really nice way, I think, as a form. This poem. That's it. Now I'm going to be quiet about shepherds. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think that's sort of an element. I was thinking in those lines, sort of the image I had was, funnily enough, of the countryside, where a lot of there's a lot of foraging that comes along because the land is so fertile. So I was watching a lot of videos. There's this guy in the countryside in the Philippines who sort of takes you through these sort of beautiful, sweeping like vistas of the countryside, and also like foraging, but also in a sustainable way. Um, Sort of, you leave some behind for it to grow for in the seasons to follow. But it always like gives back. And so I think part of that was the image that I guess sort of semi-consciously was there when I was writing those lines. Um, yeah, so definitely, yeah, I hadn't even thought about like the the pastoral sort of quality of that, but yeah, definitely, it's definitely in there. Yeah, thank you for spotting that.
You're very welcome. It's very interesting.
I never know how to kind of phrase these questions because I don't ever want to ask a poem, what does this line mean? That's the worst question you could ever ask. But the line, or rather the sentence is within the line, why this endless need to self-alchemize? What is self-alchemization mean to you, and especially in the context of kind of immigrant poetry?
Yeah, I think part of it is going back to the sort of uh, conceptualist sort of theories of like transformation, of like uh, taking, I guess, sublimating yourself from all of these like sort of traumas and tensions, um, and this sort of like gnawing need to sort of make something of yourself, to sort of like decide on like something, uh, just to sort of reach some grand conclusion um, about yourself, and about your situation. And so that follows into the next line, I think, where sort of the idea was that uh, it is just barely enough to know what makes one unbearably real. Um, Sort of situating yourself in the environment again, but not in a way that's about possession or even self-possession, but something that uh, attunes you to the moment. Not so much focus on this idea of trying to, I guess, produce or sort of like exploit yourself and your into something. I guess sort of in a similar way to like land and sort of the enclosure. Um, yeah, to like sort of this need to like to produce and produce and produce.
Interesting. I would also like to talk about the kind of the ending of the poem, this list about what makes one unbearably real, and this list it kind of takes from the Philippines, it takes from the US, it takes from really beautiful things, from really awful, gross things, and then it kind of ends with, and saltwater, so much of the living saltwater. It's a really powerful ending, this list, and the kind of sense of acceleration, and then this kind of ending, and saltwater, I don't know, to me I'm thinking of like ocean water maybe, and kind of symbolizing the distance, but it's kind of I think it's a very open image, like you can think maybe tears or something, like there's so many things it could mean. And I'm not asking what what it means, but just kind of what is this ending? What were the choices you kind of made in this ending, in this list, in this kind of what to include, what not to include, and just the choice to end it in this way.
Yeah, I think again, it comes down to not wanting to exploit these images for sort of meaning. There's a sense in which, coming back to the idea of being a split subject, sort of I wanted to show this idea of excess, sort of where it's not images of fragmentation. It's like accretive. It's like it all adds up, and I didn't want to sort of because I say my aunt's old mango tree twice, but I refuse to give it, any sort of story. So sort of first saying it ironically, sort of like, there's a story about my aunt's old mango tree, but I'm not going to give it to you. But at the same time, it's something that is so important to me. Um, uh, yeah, so there's a sense of like accretion and um, overflow instead of fragmentation. And I definitely wanted to fill it with, like you said, like things that are gross, but also things that are beautiful, but at the same time, sometimes like the same thing, and all at once. Like I feel like Stranger Sweat is, it could be like the grossness of like being in a train and, having a stranger rub up on you, but it's also like, you know, hooking up with somebody,
Yes.
and how like wonderful that like connection is. Yeah, or like the gasoline smell of a freshly crushed leaf, like sort of, well, I love the smell of gasoline, which is, it's so bad for you.
Me too.
One of those freaks.
Yeah.
No,
But it smells so good. It's like addicting. Yeah, and and with like the idea of salt water, I've always lived like near a coast. So first I grew up in the Philippines, and then I moved to California, in Southern California, in San Diego, and then now I live in New York. And so there's like this sort of connective tissue of every place that I've lived at, which is sort of near the water, near the ocean. And sort of the ocean is like boundaryless. It's, you can't put a wall in the ocean. And so I thought like that was a good place to sort of, um, um, it's a place you traverse, but also it's a place that is like sort of everyone's, everyone has like, um, everyone at least should have access to the ocean. I'm terrified of the desert. I don't know why, but the desert is always just so. Some people find like it very peaceful. I find it very disconcerting.
Yeah, I can
But yeah, and the idea that like it's living. It's also like as much as I love the ocean, it's also sort of like kind of gross to me. It's like full of like fish pee and like and sort of all other like bacteria nastiness. Um uh but also it's like it's alive and it's connecting. It's a landscape that one could see like your people say often like your oceans apart. but like it's actually so much more connective. And sort of I didn't, again, didn't want to privilege this idea of separateness when it came to like immigration. I wanted to sort of connect all aspects of myself and sort of and the feeling of being in the ocean too. It's very like all encompassing, it's surrounding, uh it's very womb like. um but yeah, so I think that's sort of where where that comes from.
Okay, I think now is a good time for us to ask a question that we're asking all of our guests this edition, which is why write? Why do you write? Why should people write? Why shouldn't people write? However you want to go with it, we leave it deliberately open so that we can get a bunch of crazy responses. So feel free to say whatever you want. This is your personal soapbox.
Writing is all about being a shepherd.
Just like everything else.
Writing is about being a bad shepherd, and
Well, now you mention it.
I think you have the title of this podcast. Is Bad Shepherds.
Right.
Very good.
I guess I think fundamentally, like, humans are creative, not just in the sense of like the arts or like literature, but also like they want to build something. They want to see something in the world created. Whether that's like poetry or pottery or a union or something. People like crave to create, and so I think that and writing is sort of like a wonderful avenue for that. Writing in particular is very exposing. I think a lot of like I've had a lot of therapists, sort of say the importance of like journal writing, and like they never say why really, but from what I find, like writing is so important because it reveals so much about yourself and about your thinking, where and your biases, and like if you like write, you write about how you feel, and like how you feel bad, and how like you hate yourself, or like you do all these things, and like you're able to actually see a physical record of it and examine it. You're less stuck in yourself. You can like think about it critically. So like putting your thoughts, I guess, uh, into writing is like really crucial in like not just understanding yourself, but sort of seeing a clearer version of yourself, um, which is to say that like you should think critically too about what you write. Uh, yeah, and never take it for granted that it's always the truth. Yeah, I guess that's why people should write.
Very good answer.
I really like that. That really resonates with me, this idea that kind of when you write down, when you just write something, then you have your own thought patterns kind of on paper, and when they're just in your brain, you don't really see them clearly, and then on paper it's like undeniable. I think that's a very good point. I think that really resonates with me.
Okay, well then, I guess with no further ado, would you like to read the poem one last time for us in light of the discussion maybe people will see new insights.
Sure, yes. You've actually given me a lot to think about.
You for us too, though, absolutely.
And I want to write more, so very productive.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Okay, so Immigrant Pastoral number 38. Suppose it depends on which way your neck is bent. Up north, I hear talk of evergreens. How is it any different from here, where there is no word for winter? Names accrue like seasons. Tragedy precedes, and we follow. An immigrant poet could write about mothers, as they inevitably do. If I open my mouth, then who will spit in it? Someone else's eyes trailing the back of your head, resentment like leaking gas, rainbowed in the light of rain. The city is cleaner than you left it, but less like a city now than a mall. What realistically could you call a round trip? There is a story about my aunt's old mango tree, or another aunt's plastic bags, folded like flags, military style, tucked beneath the kitchen sink. The fever first in your throat, then your legs, the light which candies the leaves, the fruit barely at a swell, and still, April is cruel wherever you go. The city bloodier than you left it, and no less broken. How much is left to look back on? How much future is left anyway? If I could choose, I would choose this life over again. An immigrant poet could write about groceries, or a touch, or the moon, which all poets require, but always fall short of obtaining. Why this endless need to self-alchemize? Or perhaps it is just barely enough to know what makes one unbearably real. A bookstore, an underpass, old-growth forest, stranger's sweat, Manila in the daytime, Chaparral Grove, my aunt's mango tree, Brooklyn in July, airplane window seat, stranger's piss, Manila at night, California tide pools at dusk, the gasoline smell of a freshly crushed leaf, and salt water. So much of the living salt water.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I guess with that, we'll say thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, Sebastian. It's been a really, really wonderful chat. Thanks for submitting such a wonderful poem. And dear viewer, we'll see you next week. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.
Bye.